Hello, today I'm doing an August wrap-up video of all of the classic books that I read in August. I started out with Mansfield Park by Jane Austen, but I'm actually going to wait till the end to review that one because just some of the things I want to say about it are definitely big spoilers, so if you haven't read it, I will put it at the end so you can just click off the video if you don't want to get spoilers if you haven't read it. So I'm going to start with Three Men in a Boat by Jerome K. Jerome. This was my favourite book that I read in August. It was fantastic. It was just so much more than I thought it was going to be. So I bought this in a charity shop about 4 or 5 years ago, and I almost got rid of it a few years ago thinking that I would never read it. Why did I buy it? This is gonna be so boring. And my mum kept it. And then when I got into classics last year, I was like, oh yeah, I have this book that I almost got rid of. I should probably get around to reading this. But I still felt like maybe it was gonna bore me. I had no idea what it was gonna be about. The little I did know from the title just kind of made me feel like I wasn't going to be that interested in it, but I was. This book essentially contains tons of mini stories about the three men in a boat and their dog. One of the observations made in this book, for example, is that people in the 1880s were displaying like plates and bowls from many decades ago, and the character is basically saying, wow, I bet people are gonna love my shitty pieces of china that I don't care about right now, that is so common, like nobody takes a second glance at. They're just everyday things in our lives, and in 50 years time people are gonna be displaying that and being like, oh my god, this is amazing. Which is very true. And that's just one of the many relevant observations that Jerome makes in this book, and all of them are so hilarious. I laughed out loud so many times. This is definitely the funniest book that I've ever read. It's not perfect. There are some offensive things within this book, but for the most part, most of it is really funny and delightful, and I loved it. I'm gonna read one of my favourite quotes, which is, "Let your boat of life be light, packed with only what you need. A homely home and simple pleasures, one or two friends worth the name, someone to love and someone to love you, a cat, a dog and a pipe or two, enough to eat and enough to wear, and a little more than enough to drink, for thirst is a dangerous thing." I love this book. I really recommend it. If you're just looking for something short and light-hearted and humorous, you cannot go wrong with this book, and I'm very excited to read the sequel. So the next book I read in August was Homage to Catalonia. This was a buddy read with Lee from Lee's Library, also known as Books in Barcelona on Instagram. I'm so glad that she suggested we read this because I wouldn't have picked it up as soon as I did had she not suggested it, and this has become one of my favourite non-fiction books of the year. So Homage to Catalonia is a book about George Orwell's time fighting in the Spanish Civil War starting at the end of 1936. And going into this, I really knew absolutely nothing about the Spanish Civil War. Nothing. And I learned so much. I think Orwell does an amazing job explaining the Spanish Civil War. If you are confused about anything, there are also appendices in the back which go into more detail about different political parties, coalitions, etc., because there is so much infighting going on in here, and so many party acronym names to keep track of. But it's tremendously well written. As you can tell by the amount of tabs in here, I really enjoyed it. I found a lot of quotes and instances of things that happened during the Civil War that I wanted to reflect on. Orange is for just general quotes, and blue is for things that have happened that maybe I didn't know about, or things that I may want to look back on in the future if I ever have a discussion about the Spanish Civil War or something, things that I want to remember that happened during that time. There's so much in here that's so memorable, and it was also surprisingly humorous. The way that Orwell describes his time fighting, getting shot at, is very casual and matter of fact. Especially the way he describes getting shot through the throat when he thought he was going to die. It's incredibly matter of fact, and even the dark parts are tinged with humour. If you ever want to learn about the Spanish Civil War, if you're interested in communism or socialism, if you just like Orwell's writing, really recommend you read this. I'm not sure I ever would have read it if I didn't get it in a box set. My mum got this like brand new box set of tons of these old Penguin Modern Classics in a charity shop. Never been taken out of the box, never been touched. They'd been in this box set for like 20 years. We had a hard time getting them out of the box. I might never have read this if she didn't find that box set, so yeah, I'm very glad that she did, because this has just been amazing. Also, for anyone interested in these editions, the text is very large, which is very good, and there's also ample space for annotations if that's what you were interested in. It's quite stiff, so you may need to break the spine. I don't care about doing that. I'm fine with breaking the spines of my books. I love it. And I'm not sure how I feel about the formatting of the like text spacing, but nice that it's got large text size. Not a fan of how many classics there are that have teeny tiny text. So then I read a play, and that was A Streetcar Named Desire by Tennessee Williams. I wasn't sure what to expect with this one, and I was kind of blown away, to be honest. It definitely deserves all of the praise it gets. It's incredible how Tennessee Williams managed to include so much depth into the characters within this play in such a short amount of pages. The characters within the story are so interesting. They're so full of horrible qualities, but so fascinating to watch at the same time. I am really excited to watch the movie, and I also feel like this would be an amazing play to see performed, because the characters are just phenomenally crafted, really. Everything they say, everything about them is just wonderfully done. I don't really want to say what this is about just because it's so short. I don't want to give too much away about it, but it is amazing. There is a lot of upsetting content in this, but I think it's done so well, and I'm very glad I read this. Also, about this edition is it has my least favourite binding ever. I wish this binding did not exist. So, like, when you want to read it, the pages don't want to go past a certain point because this part has been glued. I'm sure I'm probably one of the only people who cares about this, but it is annoying. I got this secondhand, so whatever, you know, this barely cost me anything. It didn't change the contents inside, but I did find it uncomfortable to read because of the binding that it has, so if it also bothers you, potentially you might want to find a different edition if you can, because yeah, it was a bit uncomfortable to read. I'd say also that this probably has the smallest text size of all of the books that I read in August. Not terribly small, but smaller than the other books. So on to Mansfield Park by Jane Austen. This is my second Austen that I've read after Pride and Prejudice, which I read late last year, and yeah, I did not like it as much. I thought this was okay. I definitely see why it's a lot of people's least favourite. I know it's also a lot of people's favourite, and I'm happy for you if that's the case. It's just not mine, at least not at this point in my life. So I originally started reading this in June. I took it with me on holiday, thinking that I would finish it on holiday, and I did not. It took me a lot longer than I thought it was going to finish reading this. It has quite a slow pace, which I started to enjoy, and then I no longer enjoyed it, which is where my main problems with Mansfield Park begin. And that is that you read almost 500 pages of really slow building of the story, all of the characters, and then you get 10 pages from the end and that's when everything happens. And it just felt really rushed, and I didn't like that. Now, Jane Austen herself is a little bit disparaging about this book. She said in a letter to her brother that this wasn't half so entertaining as Pride and Prejudice, and I think she may have been right about that one. To me, it just didn't feel satisfying after reading so much, because this is quite a big book for what the story is. After reading so much, spending almost 2 months reading it, really getting to know all of the characters, and then everything just kind of happens at the end and then it ends, and that's it. There felt like there was no proper build-up. I'm not gonna lie, I didn't like Fanny ending up with Edmund, but whatever, that's Jane Austen's choice. The thing about Fanny ending up with Edmund instead of Henry, who was much more interesting, and his relationship with Fanny would have been sublime, is that Fanny ending up with Edmund makes the book feel even more rushed, because even very near the end we still have Edmund saying that Mary Crawford is the only woman for him, she's the only person he could ever think of marrying, and then a few pages later he marries Fanny. So yeah, I just felt there was no build up to that, and it made the ending feel so much more rushed than it already did. And I could see how it could be argued that throughout the book Fanny and Edmund's relationship is being built up and growing and blossoming and whatever, but it didn't feel that way to me. Even if you ignore all of the comments about Edmund being like a brother to Fanny and vice versa, and everything about how they're like siblings, even if you ignore all of that, Edmund still feels like a reflection of William, Fanny's brother. They're so similar in the ways that they interact with Fanny, the ways that they defend her and care for her. They are just so similar that it's uncomfortable. He feels like such a parallel to her brother, and yeah, it made it really hard for me to see their moments together as anything but familial, because I mean it is anyway because they're cousins, but yeah, he was just so much like a brother that I couldn't possibly see it as romantic. And then in the last few pages of the book there's just a little thing that's like, oh yeah, sometime after this they got married, but they waited the right amount of time, don't worry, and it all happened and that was great and they're happy now. Like, it just felt so rushed. It felt so rushed, and I feel like I'm really complaining about this. I still gave it 3 stars. I still enjoyed a lot of it. I just did not like the ending, and I didn't think that it was executed very well. So those were the 4 classics that I read in August. I'm very pleased. I think I had a good reading month here. Even though I had my gripes with Mansfield Park, I still enjoyed it. There's not a single book here that I didn't like, so yeah, very pleased with that, and hopefully I have just as good a reading month, if not better, in September.